Hello, this video is the history of Greece, because I'm doing histories of countries now. And Greece is a good country to do the history of, because there's lots of history. We've all heard of Greece, because we've all had that class of Greece. The location of Greece is in the Mediterranean Sea, to the east of Italy. Like between Italy and Israel. I was in Greece last summer. I saw all the sights. It was cool. Nice people. Grumpy people. They can be grumpy and snappy, but they're fair and generous, and friendly. Their English isn't the greatest. Okay, so history of Greece. Yeah, Greece has really good history because they had, I think they, like back in those days, 3,000 or 1,000 BC. The history where Greece is really has like a lot of history and trumps everybody else, and what everybody usually studies is about from 1,000 BC to about like, I guess, the conquest of Rome in like 168 BC. So, but there's nobody else really having history. We don't really study history from many other people from that time period, and I think mainly it's because they just didn't have written language, and so they didn't record it, and so it's just lost to history. Greeks, so written language is great. That's one reason Greeks are so fascinating to us. They could write all that stuff down, and then of course use their written language to communicate with each other and have an actual culture and grow with ideas and technology and everything. They had written language because their land wasn't really the greatest. It required some work in order to live. They lived off of grain that they had to harvest. The earth there is very rocky, so it doesn't grow a lot of food. So they have to, harvest and stuff. And the water is kind of alkaline or something, so it doesn't really produce that many fish. So they require them to cooperate together to create little groups of people and stuff, which is great for civilization. Teaches people cooperation, and they create the little city-states and the trade, and they become hard workers, and they write their written language. But there's another facet to that, and I think it's the gods. The Greeks had a very detailed story of their gods, detailed mythology with lots of gods and detailed stories of them, and I think it's because their gods actually did exist. I think their gods were aliens, human beings from other planets who came in spaceships. And I think that they came down there to help the Greeks and try to kickstart civilization in the world. And it stuck in Greece, and they chose Greece because it was a good place to get people to learn civilization. I think the gods did the same thing with the Mayans, but it didn't work in Maya in Mexico because life is too easy there. It's in the jungle, and it was too easy for those people to just go back in the jungle and sit on their asses all day long, eat mangoes and bananas. And so the civilization fell. But the Greeks had motivation to keep working, and plus they had their ocean all around them, so that they could travel around and communicate with other people and have adventure and all that stuff. So so let's see. Let's start with the beginning of Greece. The first Greek culture and like religion and their legacy with the gods is related to all the other people around that area. The Jews, the Israelis from Israel, which is like right over there, a couple hundred miles down the way. And then Egypt, which is right across the Mediterranean Sea, a couple hundred miles across the Mediterranean Sea. Up the Nile a little bit, and you're at the Greek pyramids. So there's always been communication between all those people and the gods. helped to make the pyramids and start civilization in Mesopotamia, and so it was the same thing with Greece. Um, and I and I think that I guess this is part of my like a history of religion, but they were really motivated to try to figure out like what was going down in the world and strive for excellence because they knew that there was something else out there from all the gods. If you look at, maybe most Greeks haven't been to the pyramids, but they'd heard of it. If you look at the pyramid, you're always reminded that there's something out there, something great out there. It's like, imagine if we have this like obelisk that's this crystal obelisk that's 50,000 feet high. We look at it every day. We'd be like, whoa, oh my God, the gods made that. And so, anyways, they became kind of superstitious, and they thought that the gods were in control of everything. I was going to do a history of religion, so maybe I shouldn't dwell too much on that. Or maybe I should. They worshiped their gods. They had like Zeus, who was the king of the gods, and then his wife was Hera, who was the queen of the gods. And they had like animals that were corresponded to their gods, like Hera. His animal was the cow, because the cow has really deep eyes, and the cow had Hera's eyes, really wise. So they respected the gods. They thought the gods were wise and leaders of humankind and benefactors. And so that's why they built those giant temples to the gods. And maybe even the gods actually helped them make the temple. Greeks started the Olympic Games back in like 779 BC officially, but they had been having them going on in a less official manner since like 1300 BC for a really long time. And last summer I went to Olympia, where they had the ancient Olympic Games, and I saw the Temple of Jupiter, and the columns of the Temple of Jupiter were really big. They're like as big around as my van. And they went up really, really high, and there was supposed to be a statue of Zeus there that was like, he was sitting down, but sitting down, he was still like 60 feet tall. He was huge. He was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, and just picturing how big that was and how hard it would have been to make, maybe it was the gods, the aliens came down and helped them, or taught them technology to make them. But the story, the mythology behind Olympia is that the gods helped them build Olympia. Helped them build the Temple of Zeus. And it was their idea to do the Olympics. So I actually do believe that. I was going to make a video about that after I went to, like, insights about visiting Greece after I went there, and I was going to confirm the supernatural element, the alien element of the history influence of Greece when I was there, because of the amazing, especially there's this place called Mycenae, where Agamemnon was, and there's this place called Treasure of Atreus, which is, I guess, where they had the treasure of some dude named Atreus. And it's in this big, like, cave underneath a hilltop, but it was basically, what they did was they just, like, emptied out a big area on the side of the hill and then put a big dome inside of it, and the acoustics are amazing. You can watch my YouTube video. I slapped my foot down, and you can hear it echo, like, 20 times. But they have this, but the dome is perfectly built. And then they have this big stone going over the entrance. You have these huge, as you go into it, there's this corridor lined by these huge rocks that are like as big as my van, or actually longer than my van. Maybe like a 50% longer than my van, but just as big as my van, pretty much. But then there's this stone that goes over the doorway, and the doorway is like 10 feet tall. And there's this big stone that goes over the doorway, and the stone is like huge. It was like, like 1.5 times as long as my van, as big as my van. And it was way up there. And I asked the lady, at the ticket lady, how heavy it was, and I think she said like 240 tons or something, 140 tons. But I looked at it and I was like, oh my God, that must be like 1,000 tons. I mean, it was huge. And I was just like, I don't see how they could have done this. I don't know. I don't see how they could have brought it from anywhere and placed it up here. And Mycenae, the place that's right there where the Mycenaeans lived, has an entranceway that has these huge rocks. And the story is that the Cyclopses helped them build it. And the Cyclopses were these giants who were like half god, half human. And the gods themselves were supposed to be giants as well. And they have actual depictions of them on the writing. Also, the Middle Easterners had pictures of them, and they look a lot bigger. They're like twice as tall. And then you have the statues, and the statues are larger than life. But they had stories of giants intermingling with humans. Like there was one story of Artemis, the goddess of the hunt, who became Diana in Rome. I guess she likes to hunt. It was fun, and but she likes to take baths in one lake in the nude, and but she didn't like to be seen, and if any of the humans saw her, then she would kill them. Saw her naked, she'd kill them. So just really detailed stories of the gods intermingling. I haven't seen any videos recently on the mythology, but they've got they all kinds of stories. They've got what was it, Castor and Pollux, is that them, who they invented the plane, the plane, and Castor went so high up that he got too close to the sun and his wax melted that he put it together and he fell and died. And I guess that doesn't have anything to do with the gods, but Hercules was half god. His father was Zeus and the mother was some lady, and so he was a demigod, and the gods were supposed to live up on Mount Olympus. But Mount Olympus is shrouded in fog all the time, and it's also a really technical mountain. I climbed it last summer. It's really hard to climb, so I don't think anybody actually climbed it. So people probably did believe that they lived up there. And I think they really did believe that those gods existed. And so they had all these temples to them. They have the temple of Athena down there on the southern tip of the peninsula that Athens is on. Athens is the town of Athena. And then there are other towns that dedicate, the Olympus was the patron saint, patron god of Olympus was Zeus, and so it was each god had their own dominion, their own little city-state, and it was probably really like that. Each alien had his own little city-state in Greece to look over and advise on what to do, and if they needed any help, to just call on him, and he'd come down and help. It was the same thing with the Middle East and Mesopotamia. Each city-state had their own gods. So I think, and if I was to be an alien and go out there and colonize monkey people and try and teach them society, that's what I would do. I would go down and I'd be like, hey, look, it's me. Just call me God. I'm going to show you some cool technology. I'm going to teach you some cool things to do with your crops or whatever. And let's get little physical competitions going. We'll start the Olympics, and okay, I'm going to just be right over there. Just call on me if you want, and maybe I'll have hook up a psychic power device on my head. So if anybody calls my name, I'd be like, okay, what's up? Sounds just about the same. Sounds a great way to get help from outside. And aliens are helping us now too, but that's another video. So that's why I believe in God, and that was their religious backbone as well. So anyways, let's start getting on the history. Greece, the different city-states had different histories. Like Athens, for example, I know that the dude who was supposed to have found Athens in the beginning was some king dude who had come there after the flood. So ancient Athenian folklore does have tales of a great flood. like Armageddon type flood, and then after that, some dude went there, and then he begot somebody, and he begot somebody. But the earliest archaeologically shown society in Greece would have been the Minoans, and they were really early. They started maybe like 3000 BC or something, and people found their civilization buried, and they had pretty good pottery, and they made frescoes and all that stuff. I don't think people know much about them. They were destroyed by a big volcano, I think. Maybe it was Santorini that blew. Can't remember exactly which one, but one of those volcanoes blew at about 1100 BC. So it may have been that. I think there were two actually that blew, and some people think that they were the Atlanteans. But the earliest mainland civilization of Greece was Mycenae, what I was talking about just before, where the treasure of Atreus is. Mycenae is on the Peloponnesian Peninsula, maybe like 100 miles or something south of Corinth. So near 100 miles south from the Peloponnesia, where Peloponnesus connects with the mainland. Kind of halfway to Sparta. And it's this town, it was a city built on the side of a mountain up on a ridge, so it was really well fortified from other people. And they have this really amazing entrance into it with this big lion, these two lions facing each other that you can still see. And that's where Agamemnon was king. And Agamemnon had a brother named something Menelaus, I guess, or something like that, who was the king of another town somewhere around there. The legend goes that the Trojans went over there to do, I guess, peace treaty or trade or whatever. And the Trojans were Greeks. Even though Troy is in Turkey, modern-day Turkey on the coast, the entire western coast of of Turkey, was Greece back then. They all spoke Greek, same God, same everything. It was and a lot of the famous Greeks come from there, like Hippocrates or Sophocles, or I can't remember which ones, but a lot of them actually came from there. A lot of them, like a half dozen of the ones that you've heard of, household names, came from modern day Turkey up on the eastern society. So all of those islands, all the Peloponnesia, and all of Greece, all the way up to a little bit past I guess modern day Greece, is where ancient Greek culture was. And then they had settlements in Spain, North Africa. I think Carthage was a settlement of Greece. Dido, the lady who founded Carthage, was originally a Greek who had to flee from one of those Greek cities because she got deposed, or she was a princess who got kicked off or something. So there were lots of little settlements just dotted along the northern coast of Africa. They had one in some in Sicily and in Italy and all that stuff. So Greek, and also way up in the Crimea. They had some up on the Crimea, that peninsula on the northern side of the Black Sea, and also on the eastern side of the Black Sea. So they the Trojans, who were the Trojan Greeks, came over there, but then I guess their Prince Paris stole Helen, which was supposed to be the prettiest girl ever, and she went back with him, I guess, because she was married to some older guy who was too old for her, and so they got pissed off, and he amassed a big army to go down. I guess the king of that area was Agamemnon, so Agamemnon was the leader of those army, and they went all the way over to Troy. And so Agamemnon was from Mycenae, right there, which really isn't that big. See, this is a long time ago. This was at Mycenae started at 1350 BC, 500 years after, I guess, the fall of Manoah or something like that. And then by the time the Trojan War came, that was about 1185, according to the timeline that I chose to follow. And so that was like a long time back. I think that was even before they had written language. It's called the Fabulous Age because it was fables. All the stories were passed down through word of mouth. So the big, city-states, you would think, oh, Agamemnon, great king of city-state. Well, modern day idea, it was more like almost like a tribe, I mean, Mycenae wasn't like Athens from 300 BC. It was like, I mean, it's not big at all. I don't know how many people live there, but it wasn't the same thing. So yeah, they went over and over to Troy, and they besieged Troy, which is supposed to have really big walls. I didn't go to Troy. I should have. I gave up at the last minute. Stupid. Because they found it like 100 years ago. Only like 100 years ago. Some dude named like Heinrich Schliemann. And he found their walls. I wanted to see them. But yeah, they besieged him, and I guess they besieged him for 10 years. Maybe that was an exaggeration, because remember, this is the Fabulous Age. So, but yeah, they besieged him for 10 years, and they couldn't beat him because they were behind their wall, and I guess they had a good system of growing stuff inside their walls or something. But they had some skirmishes out there. If you see the movie Troy, there's actually some stuff that's accurate, historically accurate. Not Helen of Troy, though. If you watch Helen of Troy, that's a complete and total disgraceful butchery of the story. It changed everything. You do see Helen's ass, though. She's hot. But, yeah, at one point, what's his name? Hector kills Achilles' like best buddy. And so Achilles calls Hector out, and Hector has to be honorable and goes out and fights him, but then gets killed. So Achilles drags him around the gates 3 times. But then the king Priam wanted him. They were like superstitious, and they didn't want him to wander in Hades forever. To the Elysian Fields forever, get to go to heaven or whatever. I guess the Elysian Fields. So he went out there and asked to the camp of the Greeks and asked Achilles if he could have Hector's body. So he gave him Hector's body, and they buried Hector. And then the Trojans came up with an idea to pretend that they left, and so that they put this big Trojan horse up in front of the gates, as an offering. Like, okay, you guys won, we give up, we're gonna go. And so the Trojans went and saw it, and they brought it inside their town, but there was Greeks in there, Achilles and those guys, who jumped out and opened the gates. So then all the other Greeks who were hiding jumped in and took over Troy and completely burned Troy to the ground. And so that was from 1185 to 1175. And a lot of Trojans ran. Refugees up to Ukraine. And then that was the story of Aeneas, the Aeneid. I don't know who wrote that. Homer was the one who was really famous for telling those stories, but I don't think he wrote. I think people after him wrote his stories down. But yeah, Aeneid traveled around the Mediterranean for a long time looking for a place to camp, and according to the Romans, he ended up in Rome and founded Rome, or founded the people who descended and turned into, Romulus, who founded Rome. So, then there was another ancient story, Jason and the Argonauts, and I don't remember when Jason and the Argonauts lived, but Argos is within eyesight of Mycenae. If you're up there on the on Mycenae, because it's a really good view, because it's up on the side of the mountain, and you look south towards the inlet of the Mediterranean, you can see the Mediterranean is 10 miles away or something, and Argos is right there. Argos is the port town. Argos is basically Mycenae's port town. And so Jason and the Argonauts, he traveled all over and had tales of harpies and all kinds of magical beasts and beings and stuff. Let's see. Yeah, so that's Mycenae, and that was the first civilization of Greece. But then, and then there was Homer, who told all those ancient stories of the Greeks. And it's hot, my God. Nobody for sure knows when he lived because he was in the fabulous age. They didn't have all that jotted down so great. But he lived between like 850 and 950 BC. And did he tell the story of the Odyssey also? Of Odysseus, and he was another Greek sailor who went around. This is supposed to be like, those are like the three big tales. The Aeneid and the Odyssey were the two long ones, and then Jason the Argonauts was another one. Jason, I guess, was searching for the golden fleece that could, yeah. And then they had like Clash of the Titans and stuff. Yeah, they believed, like, I guess I forgot to talk about more of the gods and stuff. Like, their mythology, they had, the gods were actually children of other gods. The Olympians were the giants, and they were the children of the Titans, who was this other family who were like giants. And like some dude, Kronos, I guess, was the king of them, and he thought that his son, he had a prophecy that his son was going to take him over, take his power and kill him. So he ate every single baby that his wife, the queen, gave, but she like hid one of them once, and then he grew up to be Zeus, and then he killed him, I guess, and then the Olympians took over. So, but there are stories in ancient Mesopotamia of gods fighting each other in family squabbles and stuff. So I think that the gods from Greece and the gods from Egypt and the Mediterranean or the Middle East, and even the flood tales, it's all from the same thing, you know. The Jews had their flood tale, well, with Noah, and the Middle Easterners did too, with I can't remember, but yeah, the Epic of Gilgamesh, and the Athenians did too. So yeah, so anyways, you had the fabulous age, and then they started to get their writing down, and I'm thinking like maybe this whole time the gods are there. Because when they had the Trojan War, supposedly the gods were there fighting on the battlefield with the humans in the Trojan War. And like half the gods fought alongside the Greeks, and half of them fought alongside the Trojans. And there was one scene where there was Mars, the god of war, and then Athena, she was basically the female goddess of war. They were fighting each other on the battlefield, and Athena won. Athena beat him. So it's possible, and you know, it's the same thing about the Mahabharata. The Mahabharata has the same exact tales of gods fighting alongside humans and fighting each other and stuff. And I don't know, man. I mean, if it's not true, I'm definitely prepared to not believe it and think that it's just some weird psychological story that humans make up. But like, why would they make that up? It doesn't make sense. People aren't that creative, you know. I'm keen, and especially from all of the megaliths and proof of aliens, I'm keen to believe that shit is real, and that those aliens, man, I mean, they were really good-hearted. They had our best intentions at heart, and they wanted to teach us civilization and everything, but for some reason they thought that war was just a natural part of the growth of civilization. They thought it was actually good for us to, maybe they just wanted to just whatever it took to get us to like be workers and create, you know, and creating arms and weapons, and then fighting was kind of good because it grows society, and so that therefore, and maybe they just had fun watching us fight anyways, you know, like it's like real life action play. I don't know, but yeah, they had so they developed an alphabet, and then they had their golden age of Greece back there in around 500 BC. There was this big flowering in Greece, And actually, this is trippy as fucking hell, dude. But there was a flowering, a flowering of consciousness all over the world in 500, and those people were not communicating with each other in those days. So I'm keen to believe, New Agers tell you that our minds open up based on astrology, and when the planets are aligned right, there's just extra cosmic energy that comes and opens up our mind, unravels our DNA, and gives us imaginations. And I'm thinking maybe something like that happened 500 BC, and that's what caused the cultural flowering of Greece, because they had some a lot of philosophers back then, and if you look at one of the heads of one of those philosophers, he has a really big head, almost like a gray alien, and maybe he's from the future. Maybe he teleported from the future, and was like trying to teach the Greeks that way. Maybe it's not just the gods, like aliens, Anunnaki, but it's also like human beings from the future going back in time to try to plant a seed of civilization for us. And so they actually brought some of them and their big heads, because that dude had a big head. But anyways, they had some philosophers, but we don't really know a lot about them, because just a lot of the their writings have been lost to the wind. Maybe from the Library of Alexandria that completely burned up. I guess that's another part of the story. But yeah, they were like the philosophers of Greece. If you want to look at the philosophers of Greece, compare them to modern day scientists. That's basically what they were. And modern day like religionists, like religion and science they're kind of related. But the philosopher is a scientist, and then the like the modern day like Catholic Church or religious people, those would have been like the priests of Diana, of the temple of like Zeus and stuff. But yeah, so those scientists, they were smart. Like one dude, can't remember who it was, but he knew that the world was round by playing with these like shadows and showing how shadows grow, and then looking at the curve of the earth, and he found out the size of the earth by within 400 miles. And there was another dude, I think his name was Anaximenes. He thought that that everything was made out of water, and like actually, our water is created from condensation of air. So he was right, which is not that hard to figure out. You just look at this. You just notice when there's lots of clouds that come together, and then the rain comes down. But he did he was doing scientific experiments just like modern day scientists. He had like a fever, and he thought that he had like sickness inside of his blood and stuff, so he wanted to purge himself of the liquid in his body, and he knew that wet cow dung, if you put it on stuff, or dry cow dung, if you put it on wet stuff, it could suck the moisture out. So he had himself buried in dry cow dung to try to suck the moisture out of his body, the sickness out of his body, but that didn't help it, and he died. But yeah, that's basically science. The philosophers of those days. Kind of like the philosophers of those days it would be kind of like a mixture of a scientist and a politician, somebody who could think for themselves, basically. And then they had in about 500, right at about 500 BC, they had Pythagoras. And he was really smart. He was the son of a jewel cutter, and he would look at the jewels, and he saw that that they were cut like, I guess, with different angles and stuff, like symmetrical angles, and then if you would hit different like sizes of cups or something like that, it would have a different sound, a different pitch. And so he came up with the idea of symmetry, and how there's like this geometrical structure basically to the universe. And he came up with the Pythagorean theorem, which I guess the square of the triangle is equal to the hypotenuse or something like that. Like if you have a triangle like this and this is equal to this. Is that how it works? Actually, it's more. This and this like squared would be equal to this. So, and they actually used some of that formula for like construction and stuff. But the interesting thing is that Pythagoras was like the first brilliant mind who actually, did anything like applied science. Didn't he make the? Oh no, that was Archimedes. But anyways, Pythagoras lived at the exact same time as the Buddha. They lived at the same exact time. They weren't the same age, but they were almost the same age. And Pythagoras and the Buddha lived at the exact same time as Confucius and Lao Tzu. And basically, the religion of China is Confucianism or Taoism. The religion of India and all of Southeast Asia is Buddhism. And the religion of America and Europe is Christianity, which basically gets its roots, theological roots, from the Greeks, which had its start with Pythagoras. So, how could China, India, and Europe all get their philosophical roots from four different people who lived at the exact same time? Astrology. That's my answer. So, Pythagoras, and then right after Pythagoras, that's when we have like all of those dudes who are household names in Greece. They all lived at the same exact time. Back in like the 480s, 490s, right after Pythagoras, like the children of Pythagoras. That's when we had the four great playwrights. Sophocles lived then. Socrates lived then. Hippocrates, the father of medicine. Like Sophocles is the father of the playwriting. Hippocrates is the father of medicine. Socrates is the father of philosophy. Like he's the demarcation point. Everybody before them, they were called them pre-Socratic philosophers. And then there was Socrates, and then after him it was more consolidated and more stuff that was actually recorded down that maintained its core, that people would read their books all the way, Because the student of Socrates was Plato. And Plato was basically... Yeah, like Socrates didn't write, so Plato was a dude who wrote and has like lots of books that we read. But who else lived in those days? Heracles. Yeah, but that was the golden age of Greece, because that is when Pericles lived, and he was the leader of Athens, and Athens was going... That's when all the stuff we hear about happened. There were lots of wars. It was a time of war, because it was a time of great consolidation of the Greeks under the Athenians, because they got attacked by the Persian Empire. Xerxes. He wanted to take over Greece, and he sent a whole fleet of like 600,000 ships into... I'm not totally clear on the timeline of all this, but into Greece. He went across the Straits of Dardanelles, I think is what it's called. That narrow strait of water that's right there at Istanbul. That's only like a quarter mile or a half mile or something across. And he built a bridge with boats tied together so that he marched his army across. And I may have a little bit mixed up in the timeline, but he came and he attacked, and they had this big battle on Marathon Beach, and one of the runners, there's this runner dude who ran from Marathon all the way to Athens, named Pericles. I can't remember his name, but the legend has it that he ran all the way back 26 miles and then like died right as he gave the news. The Persians are here, they're fighting. So then they gathered all their other fighting force and they went down and they fought him. And they had one general who gave a speech. Probably should have done my video like where I can't. Who got their navy together, and the Athenians had a great navy because they had these trireme boats called triremes, and there are these boats that they can row, and they can row really fast, like 12 miles an hour or something, because they all get the big dudes pulling, and the oars are only a foot off the water, like the portholes of the oars are only a foot off the water, so they held a whole lot of torque, and they had these big spikes fastened to the front of the ship so they could ram the side of the bigger, less maneuverable ships with all the people on them. And so they sunk all those ships, after they lured all the big army of the Persians into like between like an island and the mainland so that they could maneuver around the islands and stuff and not have to get surrounded by the giant army of the Persians, because they had the islands and stuff to protect them. So they ended up fighting away Xerxes, and he had to run back to Persia. But they were like, all the Greeks were like, oh my God, we might get attacked again by these dirty Persians. So the Athenians, they were the richest people of the time, because before that, the Athenians had found these silver mines near Athens that had made them rich. So they were the big top doggy dogs. Plus, they were pretty much smack dab right there in the middle of Greece, right next to the Peloponnese and stuff. They were like right next to the sea, pretty much. And so they were like, all right, well, let's all consolidate all of our money and make this big league of us together, so that we have the resources to fight off these Persians if they ever come back and try and kick our asses. Because the Persians were a different race, different language, different people. They didn't want to get taken over. They thought they were the best. So they created the League of... oh my God, I can't remember what it's called. The League of something, named after an island out there, just a couple islands north of Ios, where they were going to store their treasury. And so everybody, gave their taxes and stuff. But then the Athenians, without asking anybody, took all the treasury and brought it to Athens. And they were like, let's not call it the League of this island anymore. Let's call it, it's just the Athenian Empire. And so they were like, what? And some people tried to succeed, but they were like, you can't succeed. You have to keep giving us our tithe. You're part of the Athenian Empire, or we're going to kick your ass. And I think maybe they did kill some people. I think maybe the Thebans tried to revolt, but they got their asses kicked. But at any rate, the son of Xerxes came and tried to attack again, and the Greeks were able to fight them off. And I think that's when the story of the 300. Remember that movie 300? Like Xerxes II, Artaxerxes, came and was going to do a surprise attack on the other side of the mountains, like 100 miles north of Athens. And there was these Spartans who ran up and confronted them and had them lured into like a narrow canyon where they couldn't surround them with their big numbers. And I was there last summer, and I saw the statue of I can't remember the name of that king, but I didn't see any narrow straits. But anyways, they fought off those guys. They all died. All the 300 Spartans died. And then they were joined by some of these other dudes from another city-state who died. But then, by then, all of the other Greeks had their time to gather their forces, and they fought off the Persians, and the Persians had to run home again. So Greeks reign supreme. But by then, Athens was starting to, I guess, become despotic, and other people were rebelling. And so, and then the Spartans rebelled, and so they had a big war. And Sparta were good fighters, and had a not as good of a navy, but I guess by then, because I guess Athens started losing battles, ended up besieging Athens. Sparta and some other people besieged Athens for like 3 years. And so Athens started to have to, they got very unsanitary, and a plague broke out inside of Athens, and it killed like a third of the entire population, including the king of Athens, who is the famed Pericles, the dude who organized the whole kit and caboodle, the whole Athenian empire, and was a great leader and stuff. But he died, and then Athens was overwhelmed and overrun, and I guess the power went to the Spartans. But power was kind of bouncing back and forth, power was in the Athenians, and then the power was in the Spartans for a while, and then they got their asses kicked by the Thebans. And the interesting thing about Greece is they all had, in this small area, they all had very different ways about going about things. The Athenians, they were the ones where all the people lived in the Golden Age, all those famous people you've heard of. Those people, or a lot of those people, were in Athens, because Athens was so rich from those mines, but mainly from the treasury that they basically embezzled from all those other places, and they used the money on the Parthenon. The Parthenon was built with money from that treasury, from the Delian, that was called Delos, the Delian League. The Parthenon was built with that money. And and that was Pericles' idea. He wanted to make a capital of, I'm sure he did it with good intentions. He wanted to make a capital of the Greek Empire. He thought the answer to fighting off the Persians and stuff, and it was just to make another big empire. And to have a big empire meant having a big capital city, which meant having a beautiful monument on top of the hill for everybody to look at. Maybe they wanted to be like the gods, how the gods came and helped him build stuff. And maybe the gods did help him build the Acropolis up there, or the Parthenon up on the Acropolis, because I saw it last summer, and it is amazing, because the stones, it's really big for one, but the stones on top of the columns are as big as my van. They're not as high, they're maybe half as high as my van, but they're as long as my van and as wide as my van. That's what it looked like. And they are perfect, they're granite, and they're perfectly cut, or blocks of rectangle block. But they were perfectly cut, and they're perfectly placed together. And I saw some of the redoings, because they're renovating it, and so they put some new blocks up there, and the new blocks obviously are perfectly cut granite because we have technology now, but I could see how it looked. The new blocks are the same as how they had it before, but I was thinking, how the hell did they do that? How did they, with the technology they have? So maybe they did have the help of the gods, and maybe that's why they did believe in the gods so long, but whatever. He blew a whole lot of money. It was a lot of money. And I think building the temple of, the statue of Athena, maybe Athenia. What's her name? Athenia? Maybe she actually helped him make it. She's like, build me a temple. But the statue of her inside was even more expensive than the Parthenon, because I guess it was inlaid with jewels or something. But yeah, other people didn't like that, because they thought it was just ugly, and it was it was basically a show of extravagance, and because they knew where the money was coming from, and they didn't think it was fair to be stealing the money from the Delian League. But they ended up making it anyway, and I think on the second war, the second time that the Persians came, they actually went to Athens, and they overran Athens. They went into Athens, but all of the Athenians had run into the hills, so there was nobody to kill, and there was nothing to do there. So he left, but he burnt Athens to the ground first. I don't think he destroyed. Maybe he destroyed as much as he could have of the Parthenon as well, because I know they rebuilt it at one point. Got destroyed and they rebuilt it. But ooh, I gotta make a second part too.